Live. Yeah, we're just gonna go ahead and begin. So it's been trying forever. All right, so
Scary.
yeah, it looks similar to things that might be going on right now. So
Right. Yeah.
Oh wow, history.
labor riots. Labor riots are not anything that's. I mean, it's one of those things that's kind of new, I guess, in this period to America. But like a lot of things that are going on in the 19th century and the early 20th century, that kind of started in Europe. Because Europe has already had a problem with early Marxist groups and socialist groups and anarchist groups fomenting where people living in cities, due to understandably very poor living conditions, holding things like strikes and riots and stuff like that. However, city police could often be hired by company owners to act as bodyguards, and sometimes these police would often sometimes beat the people who were like strikers. Sometimes the strikers would do things like throw bombs at the police, like you see here in this picture, and things like that. So you're going to start seeing where business owners and labor, the workers, are going to be really at one another's throats. So workers often united under the leadership of unions. A union is a collection of people in one kind of business or another, where they get together and they pay dues that goes to the union. The union then is supposed to take the cash, and they do things like they might offer education to the workers. It's a form of income where if they have to take time off work or if they have to strike, the workers will still get some form of pay, sometimes legal protection, and also hire somebody who's there and supposed to talk to the boss and make plans occasionally. And so a couple of them, big national ones are Knights of Labor and the American Federation of Labor.
Do they still exist?
Yes,
A lot of them.
a lot of them do. In fact, like Texas has them too. Now the thing is about Texas though, like there's teacher ones, right? And there's police ones and stuff like that. But in Texas, if you're a public servant, you're not supposed to be able to strike, take time off. That's illegal. But they do still have a lot of power in where they have lawyers on retainer, so that in case a teacher is like finds themselves in legal trouble, they'll get an attorney, or they'll also send lobbyists down to either Washington, D.C. or to the state capitol to try to push for laws and things like that in different directions. So strikes are often usually where workers refuse to work. And usually, yeah, like I said here, it's for better pay, safety, and work hours. And so work hours were pretty rough. So a lot of factories, people would only get one day off. They might work 16-hour days. And so that's pretty rough. Better pay. So especially whenever a company saw profits go up, but the workers never saw any of it. Safety, a lot of times these people were working with either dangerous components as in chemicals, or the equipment and machinery would tear them apart. Unions also were a big factor in trying to fight child labor, because if children are doing the work, they're doing it for less pay.
But that is illegal now.
For the most part, yeah. Unless it's like a family business or something like that. Yeah.
Like I can work 40 hours a week,
Mhm.
but I have to have an 8-hour break in between each shift.
Okay.
School.
That makes sense. You can't work full time.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta be careful, like, because like I know, like I worked when I went to high school, and I would work nights, and then I'd try to go to school. It was hard.
Yeah, it's not.
I was always tired.
I
I
work
hated it.
9 to close or open to close
Mm.
every Saturday and Sunday, and then that Sunday night I have to close, and I don't get out of there till 12 o'clock, back-to-back nights, and then I have to open the next morning, like on Saturdays, and so I'm exhausted.
It's pretty tired. It's pretty hard. Joseph, did you have a question? Did you have your hand up earlier?
I did.
You forgot.
See, I kept talking because I didn't want to forget. But now you caught the forget.
That's the best way I've ever heard that.
All right, I'll just talk some more. Hey, all right, so those strikes were not a new invention, like I said earlier. England had striking for a long time, ever since the industrialization started hitting it, such as the old Luddite rebellions back whenever weavers were starting to lose their jobs to machinery, if I remember right. So they go and they smash the equipment. I mean, that's the thing. Whenever you have technological changes, people lose their jobs, and they often have to find new fields to work in. So, I mean, there's all kinds of things where people have lost their jobs in because technology's changed, like operators, right? Operators for telephones used to be a legit job, and hardly anybody can do that anymore because phone systems are digitized, stuff like that.
Oh, I would prefer a human to the hello.
Oh yeah.
Hello.
Oh yeah. Now they're getting better. Like 20 years ago, the machines were awful. Voice recognition was terrible. So they're getting better, but it still stinks.
Google's pretty good.
Yeah, well, it is. And what I hear are the ones that are so good. At first, I think it's a real person, and then I figure it out. All right, so back to this. The largest of these strikes were the Homestead, Pullman, and Haymarket riots. And so they start out as strikes, protests. They become riots, violent. Often, it's one side or the other, kind of depends. Like this one, the Pullman riot. The Pullman riot was led by a guy who's going to be the leader of the Socialist Party of America, right?
What?
His name's Eugene
Socialist
Debs.
Party of America?
There was. They've never been able to pull more than like 1 or 2% of the vote, though.
Good.
So Eugene
They
Debs,
get 1 or 2%.
even though he was a sworn pacifist, he just kept finding himself in violent things like Pullman riot. And so the Pullman riots was pretty big. Quite a few people died, and I think that's the one we saw there with the bombing. And it's gonna take some time, so they finally make it calm down, and then the president, I think it was President Garfield, is going to sign into the law, the Labor Day Act, or Labor Day. And it was supposed to be a way to kind of, hey, we're sorry, people died, just get a day off once a year.
You know about Taz?
Really?
You know about Taz?
Isn't that next week?
Yeah.
The-
It is next week. No, it's,
2
no,
weeks.
2 weeks, yeah, you're right.
Taz was a product of a recent riot where basically, was that in Seattle?
Yes.
Seattle, Washington.
Yeah.
They basically took over a block of Seattle, or like a 5-block radius. And it was
There was
originally an
nothing.
anarchy,
It
and
was
then
nothing. It was just
immediately,
people living.
yeah, there's just
and
people
killing each other
existing.
for fun.
And this dude took over. And the whole thing was like based off of veganism, and people killed each other. It was,
But socialism is still good.
yeah.
It was a lot of ideologies kind of put together. It
Yeah.
was- I
It
mean-
didn't work because you can't just not have a ruler.
I mean, pretty fast, but
But like,
it got to the point to where the military was like, enough things were happening, enough like killing and violence was happening in there, to where the police were like, okay, something actually. I think it was the mayor. The mayor of the town was like, okay, we actually have to do something now.
Mhm.
Like it was cool at first, it was all right. Now we need to intervene.
Yeah, I think now when the military, the Guard was there for a while. They managed,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean that's the thing. I mean a lot of these things, I say like history doesn't repeat itself. What's the way I heard it put before, but it does have rhythms, right? So you can hear the same rhythm every now and then. It's just different. So I mean, these things happen. And now back then, we will get to later, there will be a time of terrorism from anarchists. They're kind of, in many ways, anarchists are different than socialists, right? Anarchists believe there should be no government structure. but it's often, you'll find them side by side sometimes, working together. And I think that's kind of what you're seeing now.
Yeah.
Because back in the 1920s, you would see them work together too. During like the Red Scare and
I
stuff
think that's
like
what
that.
today is.
Oh, the 20s.
Wow.
Hey, so speaking about something else, so I've been talking about cities, been talking about industry and stuff like that, but most people in this time were farmers, especially here in the South. And so you see this sign here, this is a sign from what's called the Grangers. And the Grangers you could almost think of as kind of like, it had some aspects of a union. It was where farmers joined this kind of club, and the club had like newsletters, they would have meetings, and they would
Isn't that like
offer education. And
Brand of like something, it's like farming equipment or something.
something like that, I'm sure. In any case, the Grangers, they pushed for, they're going to eventually, it's farmers are going to start pushing for something later on. We're going to see called, the populism, right? Populist Party, and they're going to push for certain things where, for like they want to change how money is valued. They're going to ask for a lot more government involvement in things such as free places to store grain. They're going to ask for regulations of the railroads.
Why do you write your Y's backwards?
They're not backwards, they're flourished. At least you're not calling it an A like those ninth graders. All right, so economic issues from 1877 to 1898, they're confusing. As American settlers expanded west, so did the issues concerning farmers, not famers. All right, so technology and farming equipment increased rapidly. So that seems pretty good. That's one thing that, like, if you might remember when I was kind of like during COVID when I was lecturing about English history, is that when industry came into Europe, like England in particular, the British Isles, they found that they could make a lot more money off of wool than they could off of like wheat. And so they kind of kicked the poor old peasants and serfs off the land, serfdom was done by them,
Factories.
and traded them with sheep. And so, yeah, then they
Take the
wool.
people out and put sheep in.
It did. And so there was a saying that no longer do men eat sheep, but sheep eat men. Because they lost their homes and they had to go to the cities, and they're like, that's fine, you're in the city now, go work in the factory. And so, but the thing is that technology is what spurred that. Technology is going to get better in farming as well, to where you need less people to till and plow and reap more land. So one person is more efficient now. But that farming equipment costs a lot of money. And farmers don't always have a lot of money on
No,
hand.
they pose.
So they take a loan. And the idea is that if I take a loan and we get a better piece of farming equipment, maybe fertilizer and stuff, I will make so much money off of my super crop. I can pay it back and get rich. But
That never happened.
everyone was doing it. And when everyone's doing it, you have too much of that supply in the marketplace.
Not enough demand. And then the price goes down.
And the price went down.
So
So
it wasn't as good as it
Yeah.
was. Because
Everybody's going
everybody
for it.
could take a loan out, everyone could get it, everyone could pay them back.
Yeah.
But they really never did, because everyone was doing it, and no one was special.
yeah, well, just think what they're producing. They're producing for the economy. Let's say they're like corn farmers. Well, they used to be able to make so much corn, but now with the equipment, everyone can make more. Now there's this much corn out there. Well, nobody's going to pay a lot for corn when it's everywhere. And so that means also since there's an overabundance, a lot of it's just not getting bought. Not everybody can make it to the marketplace because it gets saturated and no one's buying anymore. So you have people who aren't even having their crops sold. So they're actually doing worse than they used to because everybody's working better. So that's bad. And so many farmers went into debt due to the inability to keep up with costs and loss of profits. Now, from a free market aspect, somebody might say, it sounds like you need to find either a new crop or you need to find a new livelihood. But it's too late for these people. They're already in debt. And so what happens when they're massively in debt? Usually what they put up on the loan as collateral is the farm. So they lose the farm. Yeah, they lose the farm to the bank. And so now they can't even do that. So now they're just like.
They can still do that, right? Like you can use your home and cars.
Like in Texas, they
You
can't
don't pay.
take your land or your, like if it's your house of residency, they can't take that.
But they can take your car if you don't see it.
Yeah, they can take your car, they can take your other pieces of property.
So
and stuff like
I
that.
own quite a bit of land. Could they still take that from me?
Not if it's like your home.
If
your
it's
residence.
one piece of land, like say you have 1,000 acres, right?
Mhm.
And you live on that 1,000 acres, and that means they can't take that 1,000 acres.
Yeah, like especially if you're like, I think too, they can't take piece of property from you if it's your livelihood.
Right.
So,
So like if it's your farm and you make money off that farm, and that's the only way you make money, they can't take that farm.
So I own like land, but like it's not everywhere.
Then they can take that.
you better pay your taxes just in case.
Well, it's, yeah, we do, of course.
Well, too, like if you don't, they could do things like they could put a lien on it. And so that means you're never able to sell it until you pay that lien off and stuff.
We don't want to sell it.
I'm just saying. Like it might be yours, but I'm saying you never know when. It could come down later, and who knows? Like laws can change. So it's not good.
But we're very good at that.
All right. So many farmers went into debt. Farmers generally supported silver coinage. The reason is because there are certain things they believe that gold was controlled by banks. Banks are bad. They're taking your farm and they're giving you high interest loans that are ruining you.
Yes.
So farms hated the banks. Another thing too is there's a lot more silver than there is gold. So they were hoping that this would make more currency. And if there's more currency, it's not necessarily true, but they believed it would help bring up their buying power, where they could use their money on more things.
Not true.
I don't know if it is.
Yeah, like if you're a tax fugitive, they can take all of your money.
All right, so which would increase money supply and inflate prices. So whenever a price, like whenever they say inflation, that means things cost more. Deflation, things cost less.
Right,
So
because we had an inflation of gas prices this week.
I'm glad I feel that. Yeah,
That's what happens in every hurricane. Every hurricane, they're like, oh, gas price.
Dude, the gas prices during lockdown. Oh, best.
Here's the thing. Galveston is one of the biggest oil refineries in the world. The Louisiana coast has quite a few too.
Oh, yeah.
So when the hurricanes hit those, that can hurt the supply.
Which is
Thanks.
why
Which
it's
increases the demand. I mean,
It
the
was
demand
only
is already
3 cents
high.
more expensive, though.
The demand is already high. It's what is it called? Inversely proportional.
It is.
If the demand is high, and so the higher the supply, the less money it costs. The higher the demand, the more money it costs. And if there's no supply and a lot of demand, then it's going to cost a lot. But if there's a lot of supply and no demand, it's going to cost.
And that's why some smart people who don't have your best interests in mind manipulate supply, such as OPEC, as far as like Arab oil, or like diamonds. Diamonds are controlled by a few small corporations, like the De Beers cartel and stuff like that. And so even though there's a lot of diamonds in the earth that are accessible, but the supply is controlled, so the price is still high. So, I mean, this is how it is. Whereas, I mean, there's like some things like it's quite valuable, but there's a lot of it. Like around here, drinking water. So, tap water is not that expensive. Some places, though, hard to get. Hey, look at this.
Texas.
So, now the thing is about Texas, after the Civil War, the Union Army was unleashed on the western half of Texas to get rid of the Comanche. Before the Civil War was over, not a lot of farmers and Texans could really move very far past Fort Worth, because then you were like you're getting deep into Comanche territory, and you're going to wind up getting your scalp taken. Well, once the Comanche are driven out, there's still a lot of cattle and horses and even sheep that are all throughout central and west Texas that were first planted there by the Spanish and just left to breed for like hundreds of years. Now, in the north, you got all these factories. You got all these people who need to eat working there, and they like beef. Well, Texas is full of beef, but Chicago and New York weren't. So you have the birth of the cattle trails, where you had these large ranches where they could just round up like thousands of cows by cowboys who were mostly actually Black and Hispanic. And they would drive them up the cattle trails, and they would go all the way north of Oklahoma to make it to the first railroads in the West. And then they would get on the railroad cars, and they go off to a happy place where they were slaughtered. And it's just the life of a cow. Well, everything has purpose, right? All right, so here you see various cattle trails like Potter Bacon, Goodnight Living, Western Trail, Chisholm, Shawnee, and all that stuff. So it was dangerous work, but it paid. So the cattle industries grew as the Plain Indians withdrew. I just said that, allowing for the growth of wild cattle herds. Population growth in the industrialized sectors led to bigger demand in beef. Railroads provided an efficient way to transport cattle to the urban areas. So yeah, they had to go through a couple of states, but the rest of the way was by rail. This greatly aided the meatpacking industries. That's what helped foment Chicago. Chicago was really big and helped grow because of this. Refrigerated boxcars made the transportation of beef much more profitable. And I forgot the name of the inventor of the refrigerated boxcar, but that helped out a lot.
Well, you know who tried?
Who? You said it like it's supposed to be obvious, but I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm trying to remember.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, you do.
Adam Trask.
Oh, East of Eden?
Yeah. At the end of the book, he tried to transport cabbage, and it all got funky and mushy. Everybody was like excited, and he had investors ready.
Oh, yeah.
He like spent all of his life savings on trying to transport cabbage, but the train got delayed for like a super long time. So it would have worked if the train had like gone, but it
Mushy
didn't.
cabbage. So it was like kimchi or something.
So it was like gross, fermented, gross, nasty cabbage that nobody could use. But like if the train had gone when it was scheduled, it would have been fine.
Yeah.
Wait,
What,
everybody would have been like, what?
What book is this?
Used to be.
East of Eden.
I never read it.
You don't need to.
I've always heard that.
It's not something I feel like you would actually. Well, would you enjoy it?
Probably not.
I'm hard to
Mine.
please when it comes to fiction. I really am.
It's
Really hard.
it feels like a nonfiction.
Yeah.
It reads like a fiction, but it feels like a nonfiction because he's also talking about like his childhood.
Uh-huh.
Like he puts like little information about his childhood,
Uh-huh.
and because the Hamiltons, one of the families that he talks about, is like Sam Hamilton is like his great grandfather or his like grandfather or something. Anyway.
I'm sorry. I'm in
And
the
then
middle
he
of a book about Mao starving millions of people to death. I'm kind of having a time with that one now.
I love books about dictators starving people.
Okay, so back to this. So cattle trails in Texas led to good but dangerous profits. However, it will be shut down by barbed wire. So like cattle trails were very destructive to those poor farmers who were in the way. Cattle trails were not always set in one lane, right? So it'd veer to the left or right, depending on when they're doing it. And when you have thousands of cows go through your farm's ruined. Like whatever you plowed, whatever crops you have, you have just like a single pond. It's now polluted beyond belief. Like, cows, they just kind of like sit in the water and drink and poop at the same time. And so, I mean, it's just like terrible, I mean,
That would suck. Just like you only have like one source of income.
Yeah.
Thousands of cattle roll through that. You wake up the next morning like, oh, I heard something last night. come out, your entire farm's destroyed. The one watering hole that you have for fresh water is just
Yeah.
completely gone.
But I
Yeah.
love cows. If I could be a cow, I'd be a cow.
Sorry.
Sitting in the sun all day, eating grass, just chilling.
Sounds
I mean,
terrible.
Until
Until you
dinner
start,
time.
until you start
Until it's time
vomiting.
for dinner.
Yeah, you're a
Yeah,
happy
you
meal.
also start like vomiting up your own
Your
like,
cud.
Your cud.
But cows
And then you
are
swallow it
so
again.
cute.
And you vomit it. They
Precious.
don't they digest it like 5 different times? They have like
Something like that.
5 stomachs.
Because grass doesn't have a lot of nutrition.
They have like 5
Herbivores,
stomachs and they like digest it like 18 times.
that's why
Well, I think
herbivores
they're
usually are
precious.
like mostly stomach.
Yeah.
It's
I think
because
they're yummy and cute.
they have their
Yummy.
purposes.
And they have their purposes. No
They do.
purposes.
They have their purposes.
Chickens are so.
I think I would want to be a horse.
No.
Chickens are easier to raise than any other animal.
Chickens are very easy to raise.
Yeah, but chickens always
I go out there
stink
once
to
every.
me.
They do stink, but we don't keep them near the house, so they don't stink.
Oh, that's good.
But they also
Give
are
'em
very
food and water.
easily get killed.
They
Yeah,
are very
they
easy
do
to
die
kill, That's
easy.
true. That's true.
All right, so back to this. Hey, barbed wire's going to come in, and so farmers are tired of having their farms destroyed so much that they're getting into gunfights with like cowboys, right? Or they're shooting at the cows to try to make them like stampede and run over the cowboys.
Oh my god.
So
Yes.
this is not too good. And so barbed wire is going to come up. When barbed wire comes up, people are going to fence off their property, and the state is quickly going to listen to its voting base and make it illegal to cut wire. Like you could get hung for it in some places. Because when you cut wire, that means you're going to destroy somebody's property. Is like the logic behind it. And you destroy the property, they might starve or something. Windmills are also going to aid in ranching because it's going to bring in water. It's going to help out with farming too, so people are going to expand into new areas. But luckily for Texans, at this time, railroad companies are going to see all this profits from the cattle industry, so they're going to start building rail lines into Texas. And so, especially like thinking like Fort Worth, it's going to go through a boom because the railroad's going to go through there.
I've gone there.
They got the
It's
cattle
huge.
stuff.
They have
Yeah.
a lot of stuff.
And they're growing it like Fort Worth is going to make a lot of money off this because they're going to buy and sell cattle, load them up on the trains there. Dallas, right next door, is going to get a start as a place for people to bank. Like they're just going to have a lot of banking involved with a lot of people in the cattle and the railroad industry, and that's how it's going to get its start.
Dallas is pretty big now. I used
Pretty
to
big
live
now.
there.
There's like a
Pretty
lot
big.
of
I used to live there. It was pretty
Those
great.
people, I stayed there off and on, like a couple months ago.
The only thing that sucks is traffic. Traffic is garbage.
Yeah, I've had to live in cities a few times, and I've always hated it.
5 o'clock traffic when you like try and go to like school or
Mhm.
anything after like 5 to 6, you just don't go.
It's pretty terrible.
'Cause-
Yeah, it's not my thing because people are always like, "There's more to do in city," and I'm like, "I always stay at home."
Why would I want more to do when I don't do any of it?
Almost everything I want to do is at home. Almost.
same.
UFC fighting isn't.
Well, I mean, if you're gonna watch it, it is. I tell you what, though, going to a live event stinks because you can't see the cage. You're basically just watching a TV, anyways. That's bad. I mean, it's the same way. Like if it, like
That makes sense.
I guess, like I guess it's the same for like going to like a concert there,
Yeah,
and
I've
usually
done it
I
for-
can't understand it because the speakers are like so loud that it
Yeah.
kind of hides through it. I'm like, what's that in the same? I don't know. I complain a lot. I don't like. I don't know. Like
No,
TV is so much better.
You're not wrong.
You know what's better than TV?
The internet.
Playing sports.
I don't know where I was going with that.
Playing sports.
Yeah, actually doing something's better than watching it. So it's true.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
like
that's actually
playing
true.
soccer
Doing
is
something
better
is
than
better than
watching
watching it.
I don't
I know.
understand why people watch other people play video games. Why not just play the video game yourself?
Uh,
Unless you're trying to get to a level, I don't understand.
Yeah.
It's usually not for the video game and more for the personality of the person. It's like it's usually for
Right.
how funny they are, and not for the video game itself.
Well, it's also, you might not be able to get it because you can't afford it. or
That's also another one. Yeah, or you know, like when you watch a playthrough of say like a story game, you like their input and you also like the game.
Mm.
You didn't want to play the game yourself, and you know you like the person. So I mean, it's like a win-win.
Wow. All right. So, hey, so remember we
You
talked a
don't
little
get
bit
it,
about like robber barons, right? Yeah. So we have captains of industry. So like Andrew Carnegie is going to build U.S. Steel, and it's going to help build a lot of America. Thomas Edison, famous inventor,
Where do I know JP
Behind
Morgan from?
like expansion of electricity in America. J.P. Morgan, big time bank guy. Henry Ford,
Oh, that's JP
car guy.
What if Vanderbilt? That's a type of truck, right?
Yeah, I think if I remember right, Vanderbilt might have been Karma, but
What did
I don't-
Rockefeller do?
No, Vanderbilt was the store. Vanderbilt,
Was that?
right.
What?
See, he's the one I'm not sure about. Rockefeller's the oil guy
Okay.
Rockefeller is Rockefeller Center Oil Rockets.
because he's gonna make
And
Standard Oil.
JP Morgan is like finance.
Yeah,
That's
finance.
when I think of JP Morgan, I think of finance.
Yeah.
I'm almost positive.
And of course, Ford's gonna like come up with like some really
I have
good
no idea where the name
Streamlined.
There's
Ford comes
Carnegie
from.
Hall in New York too.
Vanderbilt, I think that's
Carnegie Hall.
Vanderbilt,
18-wheeler.
Yeah, that's New York. That's where Louis Armstrong played.
right, but Vanderbilt is the store.
It was like the first African American to play in Carnegie Hall.
Forget it. I'll look it up. He's the only one I could. Can't
What
think
was
of him
important
Maybe
about
I'm
Carnegie
thinking of
Hall
Boston
and Louis
Girl,
Armstrong?
Vanderbilt, uh-oh. I'm pretty sure I'm thinking of Gossip Girl, my
I don't.
Now, hey, so captains of industry. This is like a positive spin on a lot of these guys who were, forget it, who helped build up massive industries. But at the same time, they, especially like as they passed, they left behind funds that we use to build things like Carnegie Hall and stuff like that. Colleges like Vanderbilt University, and those kind of things. So they got some good, some bad. Some of the bad is like monopolies. Monopolies can be good for consumers because sometimes the monopolies will drive down prices so low that consumers can get things real cheap. However, they destroy all opposition.
Right.
So, continuing, industrialists sought to corner markets through various means. So, the corner market is to get all of the share. So, many work towards horizontal monopoly. So, horizontal monopoly is like this: you have a company, you look at horizontally. Horizontally, you have competition. So, like the one I use the other day is like, let's say I'm Pepsi, and I want to get rid of Coca-Cola, and Fanta, and all those others. And so, if I drove out them, I would have a horizontal monopoly. I would be the only one selling soda.
There'd still be Sprite.
Okay, get rid of them.
All right, so you can't get rid of Sprite.
Dr.
It's
Pepper.
immortal.
So this is where you drive out competition.
Vertical buyout competition.
You can. And, but we got laws against that now.
Yeah.
Vertical monopolies are like this: vertical up and down. This is where, all right, I own Pepsi. So, in order to make sure that my profits are higher, I want to own not just the place that brews the Pepsi, but I also want to own like the canning company. I also want to own the railroads that's going to transport it. I want to own the stores that sell it. You know, you want every single aspect of it. You want to own it. So like Carnegie's U.S. Steel would do this. And so there were a few other places that could make steel beams and stuff like that, but not many. But he would own his own trains to haul his steel, his own mines to go get it, his own smelting plants, his own factories to hammer it into shape. So he had the whole line up and down. And
Now that's how you
saved
make a lot of money. Yeah.
He did. He made a lot of money.
Because then you don't have to buy it from, because when you buy it from a place, they have to sell it for more
They need profit.
because they need profit.
Yeah.
So you cut out that middleman in all those different steps. By cutting out the middleman, that's why Walmart has great value products and things like that. Grocers has their own version of that. Because if you have all of that kind of stuff, when people buy that, that's direct profit instead of marginalized profit from other places.
And they also have their own shipping, like trucks and stuff, and warehouses. You have to get their own factories and stuff like that. Amazon does very similar with their own product lines and even like home delivery in some places. Where you have instead of having UPS, you have Amazon truck come by and deliver in some cities. So it's just like on. Well, I mean, think about the drones too, like the little drones that are trying to drop the packages, like. That way you get.
The only problem with that is you'd have to make it very, very, very safe. And that's really hard to do with, programming. However, it's possible. Like Tesla did it with their cars. They can auto drive themselves almost to perfection.
I don't see how it's not going to be the future unless somehow satellites are just made take it on load up or something.
But like Tesla cars can like autopilot very, very well.
Yeah,
Crazy.
yeah. Let's see where it goes.
And that's gotta be the future of traffic. I don't think
Probably.
the only thing that I can see getting in the way with that is the issue of not being able to control your car. Because I don't think they're going to be able to make it to where you can't be able to control your car. Because then that would like disrupt. Like in my head, I picture perfect traffic. There's no stoppage. But the only way to have that is for every single person to not have manual.
And see, that's the thing. Like imagine if it was like that, and they'd say, look, the AI is so much more safe than a human driver. If you want to drive, your car insurance is probably going to be like $1 million a year or something like that. The laws would definitely be against it. It's like, well, we have some roads that are like no live driver roads and stuff.
That would be the solution, right? You have like separate roads that either go above or below.
That means kidnapping would be easier.
Some businesses and maybe even schools though might see that as time that they can take from you though. Like let's say you're in a job that's a commuter. Now your job where you have to commute town to town, you're expected to work while you're in the car driving too.
Right.
So that could be another thing that could happen.
Well, then there's the limitation. That's like saying, like schools can't do that for situations.
They can't?
Well, like say you have to work for your family, I guess.
But if it's commute time, they could just take it.
But like, what if your family is poor and they don't have enough to have that kind of car?
Well, I don't know. It's supposed to be the way of the future. Now that goes to your other point. Now all cars are supposed to have it.
Right. But what if, we have cars today that don't have Bluetooth? What if the cars then don't have
Yeah,
Bluetooth?
my car don't got Bluetooth.
So like you have an old car.
I have an aux cord.
Yeah,
All
I
I'm
see.
saying is there would be, I'm sure people find a way around it. I'm just bringing up the problems so that people can realize there are
See, the
problems.
thing with the autopilot cars, and that I think would stop.
Hey, folks, that's going to end our lecture today. Talk to you later.
And that would stop schools and work from making you work in the car is safety.